Hey guys, today as you can see, I will be making a tier list for the different troops in Boom Beach. You might have seen a lot of tier lists from other places, other people. You might have your own tier list, and this is all my opinion. In no way making a statement of fact here. Feel free to disagree with them. I do think I have a few hot takes in this one. So as you can see here, probably one of my hot takes is I have Riflemen in the B tier. Riflemen is pretty versatile, and obviously their greatest strength is in their numbers. They're pretty good when facing defenses such as boom cannons, doom cannons, single target defenses that will do a lot of damage to other troops, but when it comes to riflemen, they just don't do well at all. And riflemen also have a fair amount of damage for as little health they have, and I think the rifleman is one of the most underrated troops in the game. Next up, we have the heavy at D tier. Now, this one is kind of also a hot-ish take. I don't think the heavy is really that good. It is pretty good early on in the early game before you unlock other more reliable tanks or reliable, cannon fodder, if you will. But yeah, heavy is just they don't do enough damage for their sole purpose is not damage, and they don't have enough health for the damage that they produce, and they're also slow. There's not that many of them. If you want a tank in front of your troops, in front of your Zookas or Bombardiers, there are better viable options. Next up, I have Zookas in the A tier. I think it's pretty fair to put Zookas here in the A tier because they're a very good troop. No matter how you play with them, if you play them with Heavy Zooka or Scorcher Zooka, Skuka, if you will, they're pretty good. And I would put them in S tier for the sole fact that players who can use Smoky Zuka really effectively are basically unstoppable. They can defeat any player base really if they can use Smoky Zuka effectively. But it does have a very high skill curve, a skill gap when using Smoky Zuka. It's really hard to master, so that's why I have them in the A tier. Next up, I also have Warriors in the A tier for a similar reason. They don't have as much as a learning curve as Zukas do. Similar concept though. Once you learn how to use them effectively, they are pretty viable. But at the same time, if you don't know how to use them effectively, they are pretty much useless. But once you figure them out, they are virtually unstoppable, especially with if you have a lot of GBE statues, or if you are lucky enough to have speed serum. If during the special weeks, they're pretty much unstoppable with speed serum. Next up, we have tanks in D tier. I'm putting tanks over heavies in D tier because they do have obviously significantly more health and they do more damage than them. I don't think tanks are very reliable though. They're very slow, low damage, but they are consistent. They're I think probably the best troop in mid tier gameplay, but tanks are also somewhat viable in later game gameplay strategy, but there are much more viable alternatives to using tanks, such as Scorchers that we'll get to, and even Riflemen, and really anything if you want to use a troop to tank. Next up on the list, we have Medics. Medics I have at C tier, and I know a lot of you might rank Medics lower, but I think they are pretty versatile. I think they're the best support troop in the game, kind of foreshadowing for the next support troop in the game. It obviously just heals. Its healing is pretty effective, especially for troops with more health that would actually benefit from the healing. When it comes to smoky and more surgical attacks, medics are completely useless. I would say they're like 99% useless in operations in general, and definitely completely useless in warships. And also, this tier list is not for warships, it's just for the game in general. But that being said, they are useless in warships. They're really only useful when you're using an attack strategy such as tank medic or, heavy Zuka where they would be able to heal tanks on the front line to be able to make them last longer in the long run. And next up, I have grenadiers at the B tier over riflemen. With grenadiers, their strengths are range and damage. However, they are very inconsistent. Although their speed itself isn't slow, they are slow in the sense that they take a long time to take out defenses. So grenadiers also have a little bit of a learning curve, a little bit of a skill curve. So you're going to need to know really how to use them before you just jump in there with them. Um, yeah, when you use them effectively, though, they're really, really effective. They're great at clearing mines. I think they're the only troop in the game that can clear mines without stepping on them, which is really great. That the that in itself is why a lot of players use them. I know a lot of Mega Crab players usually throw in a boat of grenadiers solely for the fact to clear mines and put a little bit of extra splash damage and some defenses in the back. But if you're looking for speed or getting down a base fast, such as in warships, or if you're limited on time on a base with a lot of ice, let's say, grenadiers are probably not the way to go. And yeah, that's my thought on the grenadiers. Next up, we have the Scorchers. Scorchers, I also have a B tier, a little bit higher than the Grenadiers. Scorchers, I think, are the optimal tanking troop in the game. Obviously, you don't unlock them until late in the game, so that is one drawback. Another drawback is they cost a lot of GBE to deploy. So if you don't have three or more gunboat energy statues, you're not going to be able to really use tanks really effectively unless you boost your gunboat statues. But obviously, since I say they're the best tank in the game, they have a lot of health. They have a lot of health, and with that health, you would think with tanks they don't do that much damage. Not tanks, the troop tanks, but tanky troops. But for the amount of health they have, the Scorchers do a a good amount of damage, an acceptable, decent amount of damage, and their speed and ability to get behind enemy lines and tank for more defenses is a benefit and also a drawback. It's a benefit because they can obviously draw the attention of more defenses. However, that's in itself a drawback because they might die faster. Um, yeah, like I said, they're pretty fast and they're really only I would say they're only B tier once you unlock maxed landing crafts, where you can use 2 Scorchers per landing craft and up to 16 Scorchers. Before that, I don't think they're very good. If you don't have max landing crafts, I would probably put them in D or maybe even B or F tier. I combined D and tier in the same word, D or tier. Anyways, D and F tier, um, because really their strength is in numbers and they don't have that much health to last that long. So pairing them up in the landing crafts is really the most effective way to make them useful. Next up, I have Cryoneers in a D tier. I think Cryoneers are an absolutely trash troop. They might be better if you can unlock them earlier, but considering they're the third to last troop you can unlock, you don't unlock them until HQ 20 or 21, really late in the game when you're looking at a progressing perspective, progressing in the game, maxing out your base. You don't unlock them until late in the game, and by then you already have all the troops you see here, so they're pretty useless. I would say they are useful in troop combinations such as Heavy Zuka or Rifleman Zuka or RCZM is when they're most useful. But really, if you need extra support to slow down defenses with their slowing ability to, freeze defenses, then you should reevaluate how you're playing the game because you should be able to effectively do that with shocks instead, or you shouldn't be progressing through a base that slowly. I don't think they're a terrible troop. They're just not very versatile or viable in the late game or at really any aspect of the game. Next up, I have Bombardiers at the S tier. Bombardiers are hands. The Bombardier is hands down the best troop in the game, and main base warships. When it comes to the main troops and not proto troops, I think the Bombardier is definitely the best troop in warships and on the main base, as I've repeatedly said. Their damage is just great. They don't have the best damage in the game. Zukas have more damage, like per landing craft value, but Bombardiers have the second best. And I think the best aspect of the Bombardier is the range. They outrange almost everything in the game except like boom cannons, shock launchers, and rocket launchers, and mortars if they walk into the range of the mortar. But usually they would outrange mortars, and either way, mortars don't do that much damage to take them out that fast. Um, the only really drawbacks are HP. They have really low health, but you can work around that by obviously putting a tank in front of them, such as the rifleman, Scorcher, even tanks. If you're not that familiar or comfortable with using riflemen or Scorchers with bombardiers. Um, yeah, they also have medium speed, which I guess is a neutral thing. It's not really a drawback. If they were too fast, that would be kind of bad because they might step out in front of troops, in front of tanks that are supposed to be defending them. And yeah, not much else needs to be said about the Bombardier. You do unlock them very late in the game, but once you do get them, they're very, very good and effective. And last but not least, I have the mechs in F tier. The mechs are so bad that the tier list I found to compile this video doesn't even have them yet on their images or whatever. Yeah, disclaimer, I did not make this. I got it off the internet. But I the tier list, I mean, I did compile my own tier list, but the template is not original. The mechs are so slow, they do no damage. They cost a lot of GBE to put out, and they don't even have that much HP to compensate for all of these drawbacks. Um, they're big, they're slow, they're ugly, they don't do damage. Not much else needs to be said. You don't unlock them till late in the game, and as the last troop you can unlock in the game, it's a pretty major letdown and a pretty disappointing. So yeah, that's my tier list. Whether you disagree or agree, again, it is my opinion. If you disagree and want to argue with me in the comments, please do so. I would love to argue any of these tier list rankings with you. But yeah, if you enjoyed the video, please leave a like. And yeah, I will see you guys later. Goodbye.